points there. And this brings me to something important. You said the word choice, right? So when it comes to healthcare, be it global health, public health, or any aspect of healthcare and well-being, the key word I think is always choice. Right? Because I would very fondly remember at this point the work of Professor Françoise Vergès. Now, Françoise Vergès is a French national from the Réunion Island. She's she's someone with a very post-colonial kind of existence. And Françoise Vergès writes that in the Réunion Island, at one point, there was a drive to use contraception to reduce the black population. And these are things that have been used against indigenous people. And so there are records that the government of the United States, for example, used to promote contraception and different forms of birth control in Abya Yala or in Latin America to prevent, to reduce the populations, the indigenous populations of those countries. So there have been efforts, if you look at colonialism, if you look at Turtle Island, as in these unceded sovereign territories of North America, right? Because here we stand in a place called Lenape, what we know as New York. So this is all land that rightfully belonged to other people, right? It was land claimed by people who came here and violently occupied this land. So here, and in places like Australia, again, a black continent that was declared terra nullius by the British, terra nullius, barren land as such, but it's not terra nullius. It was a continent where black people have been living for generations with a rich culture and everything. So in all of those places, there've been, a big part of colonization has been to use whatever, was scientific methods possible and what we would see as potential healthcare solutions to sustain their colonial projects. Right? So this is where the word choice comes. Contraception, access to reproductive health care is extremely important, in countries like mine, in Sri Lanka, or in the Republic of India, or in the South Asian region, and my adoptive homeland, the island of Ireland, has had a very long, dreadful history of women's right to a bodily autonomy not being respected. Very difficult to access safe and legal termination of pregnancy. Even today, things are better now in terms of the law, but still hard to access those services. So shall we dwell on that word choice a little bit more? Because all of these services, contraception, the right to an abortion, the right to give birth, the right to have a family, all of these are things that can be used against you in different ways by the powers that be. When they say, like Françoise Vergès talks about what happened in the Réunion Island to reduce the black population there, using contraception for that reason. And also when they say, it's against whatever it is that we believe in, so you can't access a safe and legal termination when you really need it. It's two sides of the same coin. So what we advocate for is the choice to take decisions over your bodily autonomy and take decisions over your healthcare. So how important is this word choice when you think of this mandate, the future of this mandate, and for future mandate holders to be very conscious of this word, this precious word?
So choice is contextual as well, because you and I can sit and choose and be like, I choose to have 4 kids. But how realistic and is the society and the community that exists around me ready and enabling of me to have 4 kids, right? Is the caregiving for me to then want to go back to work? Are there spaces in public where I can go and breastfeed in private? Will those children grow up in safe societies and not be harassed by the police? Will I not be worried every minute of their existence that they are not being harassed, right? So just the ability to choose, for some of us is not enough. For some people, it's enough. Some women in some European countries get paid from the moment they are pregnant, and they get paid, even their kids get money during kindergarten, right? So they can make a particular choice and it ends at choice because the systems around them enable them to just be like, oh, I want to get pregnant. And they do, and everything is fine. But for some of us, that ability to make a choice means nothing unless and until the social fabric is such that because I'm a migrant person in a particular African country, I'm not going to be kicked out of the queue because I'm queuing for the same panado as the local population. You know, choice then in that context becomes meaningless. So choice from a right to health perspective has to be accompanied by health systems that are thriving, that are well resourced, by health and care workers who understand their role as protectors and defenders of the right to health, because it's often in those private consultation rooms where a lot of the advocacy can happen for patients. And only if health and care workers understand and are empowered to act as those advocates, and they themselves won't be intimidated and harassed by saying to immigration officers, no, there's no place for immigration law in my clinic, right? So for some people, choice isn't enough because the choice has to be met with good quality, timeous access to treatment. Now, we saw with Ebola, right? It only took a white person to get Ebola for Ebola to become a global crisis. Ebola had been a crisis in those Western countries months prior, right? So choice on its own for many people is simply not enough. It's simply not enough. And under the right to health, we are compelled, and member states are compelled to create conditions of equal opportunity to realizing the right to health. And that's what I think for the future of the right to health, we ought to at least commit ourselves to. What does the creation of the equal opportunity look like? So that everyone, everywhere, regardless of the situation you are in, you are able to realize physical and mental health. Because we know choice alone for the majority of the world population is not enough. You still need to get to a clinic. If it takes you 2 months of saving your salary to afford a transport to your next hospital, your ability to make a choice is meaningless. If you fall away to treatment for HIV because you could not get nutritious, safe food in a sustainable manner, your ability to choose to be on ARVs, even with all the information you have, it's meaningless, right? So we need all of the social systems to work. And that's why I make a point that the health system as a system is actually a social system. We deal with illness and disease, but it's actually fundamentally a social system. And it has to be approached in its understanding and how we think about health systems and health infrastructure and resourcing as a social system first and foremost, and not as an investment that governments make with a grudge, because many of them invest in primary health just begrudgingly, right? And then cry when aid is withdrawn. But they themselves, when they're supposed to put their own resource into it, it's riddled with a whole lot of other things. So yeah, that's choice for many people isn't enough. But we do have the necessary frameworks within the right to health to ensure that even for those where choice is just merely the first step, and we must protect that right with everything that we have, right? We must protect that right to choose, but it must be met with many other steps along the way. We can't stop at just having the right to choose.
Just having the right to choose. So what you're saying reminds me of what Bell Hooks used to say. Bell Hooks used to describe the systems we live in as the imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist patriarchy. So everything that surrounds us, our governments, the businesses, the corporate sector, the supranational organizations, all of that is governed by the imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist patriarchy. So whatever choice we have is governed by, controlled by the imperialist, capitalist, white supremacist patriarchy. So hence the importance of the future mandate holders of this mandate being very conscious of those realities, right? So this brings me to a very good point. Because we are in this mission, and the representations of this country, as in South Africa abroad, are very special places where those are spaces for dialogue on reconciliation, spaces for dialogue on resistance as well. So Palestine, we will affirm very clearly here that from the river to the sea, that Palestine shall be free, absolutely free. And I wanted to say that the way in which you handled the situation as the situation in Palestine went from bad to worse. This like the latest unfolding of the Nakba, right? The Nakba is nothing new as well, right? For the record, it's been going on for half a century, a little bit more than half a century now, and so this latest unfolding of the Nakba, you have been using your mandate and your platform fiercely to advocate for the rights of the people of Palestine and their right to access healthcare. With the changes happening currently, what are your hopes and dreams for the people of Palestine? Do you want to say a word?
Yeah. I think it's important that in the spirit of self-determination, autonomy, choice, that you can't have sustained peace while there's still occupation. You cannot have sustained peace when the Palestinians themselves are excluded, belittled, still humiliated, and not even part of any negotiation at all. People are still making decisions on their behalf. They are still being infantilized on the one hand, and on the other hand, they are being presented to the world as if they are these barbaric individuals. And one thing we know for sure, and I've said this, and I said it already in November of 2023, that those evacuation orders, even from that time, were just making space for more land encroachment, more land occupation. And we've seen at the same time that the genocide and the bombs were going on in the Gaza Strip, we saw more land dispossession, more settler violence in the West Bank and in the East Jerusalem. And the call has always been, do not forget the other regions as well. And so what you have currently is some attempt from some quarters. But if you are like me, you remain optimistic, but the optimism is in the people, not in governments, not in so-called blocks of people who are signing particular documents. The optimism still lies in the idea that the people will free themselves. And unfortunately, we are not anywhere near true liberation and true freedom. We are nowhere near that. The ceasefire has to be unconditional. It has to be sustained. The occupation, which is illegal, it has been found to be illegal. We've always known it's illegal, but at least we have something from the last year, at least from the ICJ, that affirms that this is an illegal occupation. It must end. And there has to be, therefore, some kind of rebuilding of the social infrastructure, the social fabric, before any of that can happen. Who's going to clear the rubble in Gaza? And where is that rubble going to be disposed? Because a lot of this is mixed with weaponry, with bombs that have not gone off. How long will that take to clear just the rubble? Just to clear the rubble, right? So why we then insist that this is a genocide is that it has killed any possibility to sustain any kind of life, academic life, social life, cultural life, the right to health, the right to economic participation, the right to play sport. It has decimated every single level and layer of society. And to rebuild that won't take a year or 2 years. And so part of the justice for me, and how we think about justice for Gaza, has to be embedded in the kinds of negotiations that we are having for a ceasefire, for peace, and how we think we can move on. But it can't happen as it is right now without Palestinians in the room, without Palestinians on the table, without them leading. It's not also for them to be there to listen and to be prescribed to. They have to lead in terms of what it is that they find most urgent for their community right now, and the future and the visioning that they have for their future.
Thank you very much. And see, without the Palestinians in the room. That's such an important point, and at the same time, it's worth also reminding that the establishment, the kind of people the establishment likes, right? You're definitely not the kind of woman the establishment likes, right? And it's the badge of honor to wear. And I'm not the kind of woman the establishment likes either. The establishment hates me, and it's a good thing. It means that you're on the right track, that you're doing the right kind of critical work. So it's also important when we talk about Palestine, when we talk about other liberation struggles across the world. It's important to remember what Frantz Fanon used to say, that oppressed people, oppressed people have the right, have a very legitimate, very justifiable, very reasonable right to stand up against oppressors. Right? So it's up to the oppressor to show magnanimity and to create a table where we can resolve those issues as well.
Yeah. But I mean, of course, in the context of continued occupation, there would always be a need for resistance. So if you don't want resistance, you need to stop the occupation. Like, that's how it works. That's a sequence of events, right? To get to peace, you need to end the occupation so that there'll be no resistance. So you can then get to sustainable peace and some form of, space to negotiate. So, thank you.
Absolutely. So to end this, let me read a couple of lines from a poem by June Jordan from 1978. So this was the time of apartheid. This was read at the United Nations in 1978. It's a poem called, she named the poem a poem for South African women. And at the end of the poem, she says, June Jordan says, and who will join this standing up? And the ones who stood without sweet company will sing and sing back into the mountains and, if necessary, even under the sea. We are the ones we have been waiting for. So, we are the ones we've been waiting for.
I'm done. You all are the ones.
So you are the ones we've been waiting for. So thank you for everything that you have done in this mandate and the hopes that you have given. And a very last word about what it has been personally, because I know personally with insights into how things have been, how tough it's been, how taxing it's been, right? The frequent flights and everything. Sometimes it looks glamorous, the lounge to the airport, to the to the whatever facilities that are provided and so on. At the same time, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of pain, and writing those reports involves country visits, involve a bit of these diplomatic walking the diplomatic corridors of power and so on. But at the same time, it's coming to terms with a lot of pain, a lot of frustration, a lot of sadness, a lot of loss as well, especially in this mandate. And how has it been for you? And how have you been taking good care of yourself in running this mandate? And tell us about those the difficult moments you had.
So about the people in this room, I think you all know the difficult moments very well. Because lucky for me, I've had good people around me, including some UN colleagues. I see Aisha over there, who is she's also just finished, so she's very stress-free right now. She used to work on the situation in Somalia, so she's very happy. See, I'll be like this in a few weeks, very chilled. But she knows, and we've served on the coordination committee together. So we know the challenges both of our own mandates and our own situations, but broadly of the system as well. We know the liquidity crisis of the UN that has put a lot of pressure in terms of the working methods that we have. Constantly not knowing if you can take 2 visits, 1 visit, you're not sure what kind of support you actually have or don't have. So that adds a bit of stress and pressure, right, to a really pressurized job that you're doing pro bono. And I mean, on a personal basis, and I think I said this in my closing remarks at the third committee, that it's often the family that no one ever speaks about, that they never see. And in my case, it's been intentional because also you want to protect them from this work and from all of this. But it's also nice that they get to see and hear from colleagues what has been achieved, by them making the sacrifice of not having a mom or a partner or a daughter or a sister for 6 years. and only just making it back for her birthday and just making it back for this. And my mother had her 70th birthday, and even the day after, I was like, I have to go to a country visit to Chile, you know? So you have all of these moments that you build in. So I've learned to build and schedule joy. That's what the last 6 years have taught me. You schedule it, you insert it, and you force the joy and the happiness in life. If you're waiting for life to just miraculously be joyous for you and happy for you, it ain't gonna happen. And perhaps that's maybe one of the biggest lessons I can say. Schedule the joy, insist on the joy. And that's why we're celebrating like this from yesterday, today, and Monday in a very non-UN way, because I'm also tired of that formality. They're just not creative. And how do we just come together to just be and speak in a way that just allows us to just be free? And part of creating joy and creating the space and the moments is radical. It's part of the resistance and the rebellion, because we are meant to be hard and harsh and cold the whole time, right? So you can prove your street credentials, so you can prove your commitment to the cause. And actually, no, we can be soft, we can be warm, we can be all of those things and still be committed and still be able to show up to the fight. And so I think part of what this space and the moments have been to undo some of those difficulties of the 6 years, you know, has really been to undo some of those and add on and deposit some love into the ATM. You know, when you deposit money so that later you can withdraw. So you all have been part of the intention to deposit some energy, some love into the ATM so that later when it's needed, I can withdraw that, you know, because we need spaces such as this. We don't have them enough. Especially as women who are leaders, we don't have this enough. And being in a diplomatic space, in a multilateral space, is even more difficult to carve out the space, because people see it as a waste of time. If you notice, people see joy and just being intentional about this. We could have done how many resolutions, Silas, could we have done in the space that we've been joyous in the foyer of the mission, right? But that's part of making ourselves human, that we're not just these machines who are just churning out words and paper day after day after day, that there is more to life. And I'm hoping that inspires the wellness, the mental health, and the retelling of the stories, you know, for each other, that we can find ourselves in each other's stories. Yeah.
Absolutely, and you know, it's a reminder. It's a constant reminder from leading Black feminist thinkers as well, that we can't be miserable in our activism, and we can't be miserable.
That's not the
point.
The point is not to be activists to be miserable. It's to be activists to win, to be joyous.
Yeah. Tlaleng, thank you for everything. Thank you for all the great work you have done, and thank you for all the work you have done also to bring people together. The Lancet Commission on Racism, Structural Discrimination and Global Health. And we'll talk about the commission as we go along in this event. So it's been a pleasure sharing space with you, as always. And thank you for all your work. And you can stay seated here, I think. Oh, do you want to? Yeah, stay seated. So now we'll go to the family. We'll go to the source. It's my pleasure and my greatest honor to invite to the stage to take a seat with us to Mrs. Agnes Dr Mofokeng, the mommy.